This is Technically Legal, a podcast about legal technology, innovation in the legal industry, and the impact tech is having on the law. I'm Chad Main, the founder of legal services company Percipient. On today's show, we welcome back Lucas Moskowitz. He's the general counsel for Robinhood. We're going to talk about tokenization of real-world assets and recent changes to crypto laws. How do you apply a legal rule about orange groves that was handed down by the Supreme Court in 1946 to digital tokens that settle instantly on blockchains? How do you regulate a global decentralized investment ledger using laws written before the invention of the transistor? Another question for you. If real estate deeds, art, and private contracts move onto the blockchain, what happens to the legal frameworks that govern ownership? We're going to get into those questions today and many more on today's show as we welcome back Lucas Moskowitz. He's general counsel for the financial investing app Robinhood. Lucas was first on the show in August of 2024. And if you tuned into that one, you might recall that Lucas is uniquely qualified to work in a legal department for an app with the mantra that it wants to democratize finance for everyone. Lucas started his career in big law, but moved over to the public sector with stints at the SEC and as an investigator for the Senate Banking Committee. He then moved to Robinhood and ultimately took the role of GC in 2020. Lucas is coming back on the show to talk about tokenization of real-world assets, or RWA as crypto enthusiasts call them. We'll also break down recent and pending litigation in Washington, including the Clarity Act and the Genius Act, and we will also look into why Europe might be a little bit ahead of the U.S. in crypto regulation. So since you and I spoke August of last year, I want to go over a couple of the stats that were current at that time internally about Robinhood. One of the things you said back then was the customer base for Robinhood trends a little younger. 32, 33 was the median age at that point. What is it now? Is that still the same?
The customer base is around 26 million customers today. So the platform obviously continues to grow. As you pointed out, we talked about last time, I think we're still the place to go if you are a younger investor, if you're just getting started. So about half of our customers are still reporting as first-time investors. They're, again, definitely still on the younger side compared to some of the incumbent firms. So that said, obviously, the customers who opened accounts 5-10 years ago are sticking with us, and so they're getting
older,
a little bit older, and their account values are increasing, which is great to see. And now, our challenge is not only to continue to be the place to go when you are starting out, but also as you get older and you grow your portfolio and you grow your assets, and obviously we're doing a lot on the product side to meet that challenge.
I know that one of the things you said many times before in our last conversation was, and I know it's still the case, Robin, you want to democratize access to financial tools, and so that being the case, obviously those historically have not had the access, that have been younger or, just the ones that weren't bazillionaires, but it's not like you guys made a conscious decision to trend younger. Like you also try to shoot for the older guys like myself too, right?
Yeah, we want to be the home for your finances, no matter whether you're just starting out in, let's say, your early 20s, all the way through to hopefully when you end up retiring and beyond. And so, some of the things we've added, like the IRA product, right? That's a hugely successful product. First private solution that I know about that was providing an IRA without an employer and with a match provided by Robinhood. And so we've seen really great uptake on that product. Robinhood Strategies, which is our advisory product now. So you now can be on the self-directed side where you make your own decisions, decide what you want to invest in. And you can also go to a fiduciary-like advisor, a fiduciary advisory account, and get recommendations and a portfolio designed for you. And then even more than that, we have the new product called Cortex, Robinhood Cortex, which is an AI engine to deliver more information for you. And that will hopefully be a tool that you can use not only in the self-directed world, but of course, as you continue to use other products and services across the board at Robinhood.
To those ends, I saw you posted on LinkedIn recently, and you'd mentioned this before too, is education. Financial education is paramount to getting people involved in this. And it seems like the company's doubled down even since we spoke last year on these educational offerings. What's out there? What do you suggest people take a look at if they want to get into investing on Robinhood?
Yeah, like you said, we take education very seriously. Our mission is to democratize finance for all, and that comes with the responsibility to provide as much digestible education educational content as we can. I would highlight one really fun thing that I got to participate in recently, which involved our Money Drills program. So our Money Drills program is a partnership program we have with several D1 financial institutions where we're providing funding for the schools to give basic financial literacy classes to all incoming D1 athletes. And then, of course, they have the option ability to expand that out to the broader student body. It's been a really successful program. We've signed up a bunch of new schools, and we had all of our current Money Drill schools in town in DC a couple weeks ago for a big event at our office, but also the universities went and met with folks on the Hill and talked about the
Oh, cool.
programs and how important they are. And so we're making a ton of progress there. We hope to continue to bring that program to a national scale. And then, of course, we're doing all the educational content that I think we talked about on the show last time, whether that's Robinhood Learn, snacks, other kind of partnerships, and other ways to deliver financial education so that our customers can make the most informed decisions they can.
So you mentioned you're at 26 million. You were 24 last year. At that time, too, you said about half the customers are first-time investors. Assuming that's still similar?
It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So internally, that's what's changed. Growth. I mean, it's growth. But at a policy level, things have kind of changed, too, with the change of the administration. For those that might not be as familiar with crypto regulation and what's out there pending and stuff, give the 30,000-foot explanation of the Genius and the Clarity Acts, if you would, what they're trying to accomplish and what that may or may not mean.
Yeah. So like you said, the regulatory environment is certainly different now than it was under the Biden administration, and particularly with respect to crypto. That was a period of time where the focus was more on enforcing existing laws, for example, enforcing the existing security laws against crypto platforms and other crypto-related businesses. And of course, the response to that from the industry was, it's not entirely clear that these rules apply to crypto. And I think that is definitely true. I think there are many areas of current federal law, and I'm a securities law person, so I'll point to the securities laws where the securities laws don't neatly fit the world of crypto. You look at the definition of a security that came from a 1940s Supreme Court case dealing with orange groves, right? And now we've got this new technology, and there's a lot of questions. Is that sufficient to provide enough clarity here to tell what's a security and what's not? There are many questions there about whether the existing securities laws apply and whether you need to make changes, whether you need certain exemptions from those laws to be able to innovate going forward here. And so I think we were in a period where that, to me, didn't seem to be a major focus of the regulators in terms of really wanting to get to that innovative solution by adjusting the laws, changing the laws, providing I'm talking about targeted relief here to let that happen. Obviously, again, we have a new administration, we have a new Congress. Certainly, Congress has been hard at work on providing that clarity, and we support that effort. We think that Congress should step in to provide the long-term durable solution and can allow the regulators to provide the kind of the detailed on-the-ground regulatory construct and where necessary to fill in any gaps. And so you mentioned the Clarity Act, you mentioned the Genius Act, right? Genius Act providing a comprehensive regulatory framework for stablecoins. That was a great result. You're starting to see that market develop where it has the clarity. I think still some questions there to be answered, but that was a positive step forward, I think, particularly for this area of the industry for stablecoins. On the clarity side, right, the House got the clarity bill. That's a comprehensive market structure reform. So stablecoin bill was really dealing with that one particular asset class. And here on clarity, you're looking at Congress trying to provide a framework for market structure. How do we regulate platforms that are dealing with digital asset securities? How do we regulate platforms that are dealing with non-securities? So SEC, CFTC, and otherwise. Right now, that effort is transitioned over to the Senate side, and I think they're hard at work on coming up with their own version of market structure, and we'll see how close that comes to the Clarity Act. Look, we would love to see that happen. We would love to see the durable long-term solution coming out of the legislature provides, I think, that kind of certainty that the industry really needs to grow longer term.
Hey everyone, Vicky from Percipient here. I just wanted to give you a heads up about a new service Percipient is rolling out in 2026, subpoena compliance services. If your company gets a bunch of subpoenas or data requests, Percipient can help. Literally the whole process. You just forward the request to us, and Percipient takes it from there. We'll check if it's actually valid, flag any issues, and let you know about any objections. Then Percipient works with your team to gather and prep the data. You'll see everything in Percipient's secure portal: status, due dates, metrics, all of it. So you'll never be out of the loop. And my favorite part? If you're allowed to charge the requesting party for costs, Percipient software collects that money for you before we hand over the documents. Basically, Percipient handles legwork so your team can focus on the core work. If you want to chat about it, head to percipient.co or shoot us an email at subpoenas@percipient.co.
Just this morning I read, and I think it was Wall Street Journal article, said JP Morgan Chase they're offering a tokenized money market fund. So to those maybe just reading that for the first time, what is this? Explain to those that might not know, what does it mean to tokenize a real world asset?
Put simply, and kind of at a general level, tokenization is just the digital representation of a real world asset on a blockchain or in distributed ledger technology. So take a few examples, right? If I'm an everyday consumer and I want to invest in some art, but I don't have enough money to buy a bunch of different paintings, you could see that tokenization could offer a way to open those markets by fractionalizing, right? Creating a digital representation of ownership of let's say, several pieces of art. And then individual consumers could come in and buy a fractional interest of it.
Like buying a stock. You and I can't go buy Apple, but we can buy a piece of it.
You can think of pretty much any real world asset. I touched on art initially, but you're right. Real estate, stocks, right? Public stocks. So right now you want to talk about, okay, I want to buy a share of Berkshire Hathaway. I can do that on Robinhood's platform and other platforms through a fractional share. The benefits of tokenization really come in on the efficiency and 24/7 trading and faster settlement side. But on some of these other areas of the market, private securities being one of the best examples, right? There you have a product, a financial instrument, and a private stock of, let's say, any of your unicorn companies that as an everyday retail investor, you can't necessarily get into. You need to be what's called an accredited investor. So you have to satisfy a wealth test that the SEC basically sets. And I think tokenization combined with artificial intelligence getting now this better source of information and could eliminate the need for wealth-based tests in the private securities market.
How so and why? Because the thinking, whether we agree with it or not, is, hey, you don't want Joe Main Street investing his life savings on an upstart company. So we're going to protect that. So why does that become less of a worry with tech and tokenization?
Yeah, so right now, as an example, a private security wouldn't necessarily have the same level and nature of disclosure obligations that a public company does that's trading on the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ. Those securities are also, because they're not trading on a public market, they're less, in many cases, less liquid. And so historically, regulators, I think rightly, have been cautious about letting retail come in large numbers and just buy, sell, hold private securities. What tokenization does for you, for example, is it can make those private securities more liquid, create more liquid markets for those securities, because now I have a token that I can trade back and forth with other investors. The transparency built into tokenization, including smart contracts, things like that, right? That provides a level of transparency that you don't have currently in the markets. And then, of course, when you create a trading ecosystem, tokenization allows you to trade it theoretically 24/7 with faster settlements. Tokenization takes some of the manual processes out of the picture, where it's more automated, which makes it hopefully less expensive, more efficient, and it provides more access. So we think private securities are a place that tokenization can really open up and really fundamentally change, but there are certain regulatory hurdles before we can all get there. I mentioned AI. Again, I talked about the disclosure point and about the difference between private companies and public companies. Well, AI can help solve that problem, because now at your fingertips, and of course going forward with the rapid pace of development in the AI world, you can conceivably have really high quality information right at your fingertips that any retail investor can get. And so the mismatch information flow between the public markets and the private markets, that could be at least partially solved by AI solutions.
When I opened the question, I said, well, the thinking was you don't want a retail investor to leverage everything on a company they don't know much about that's illiquid. I think making it more safe is it becomes less illiquid because you can exchange that token for something else. So your life savings, like maybe if you invest in a private company, you couldn't have gotten it back until there was an exit event. Now you can. You could sell it or what have you, right?
Yeah, that's correct. It definitely, we think, is a game changer for liquidity and market quality here in the private space. And this is going to take time, right? I mean, we did public tokens in the EU. There, the regulatory regime is a little bit more developed. So we were able to do a wrapper type product. We can talk difference between a native token and a wrapper. But we did a wrapper product there where basically we're giving our eligible European customers the ability to trade US securities. We hold the underlying securities and you have a wrapper on that, which is the token that you hold. And so that's opening up US equities to Europeans. We also did a pretty limited giveaway of private stock tokens there. And that's really kind of the very first step of what we hope is a much bigger market. And then, of course, we would love to bring some of this stuff into the US. And that's kind of what we're working to do now.
Explain that wrapper thing too, because when you guys rolled out the tokenization of stock, some companies said, hey, it's not really equity, it's not this, that. But explain what is being offered by Robinhood, this wrapper, and what's being purchased.
Yeah, at a high level, you could imagine any big public company issuing their own quote unquote native token where they issue a tokenized version of their own securities and they register that with the SEC. Some companies have already done that. I think there are a few that have done that.
Is it Exodus one of them, I think?
Yeah, Galaxy, I know.
Galaxy, that's one. Yeah,
there have been some that have done it. And now it's limited what you can do with that token at the moment because of the regulatory hurdles that we've touched on a little bit already. And then there's the wrapper version of this, which is, again, we hold the underlying shares for you in the broker, and you get a tokenized version of that you can trade. And you obviously have the ability to buy and sell at the prices and the rights, for example, dividends flow through to you. And so you can create that wrapper version. I think ideally we get to a point down the road where issuers are issuing their own native tokens and registering those tokens with the SEC. And we're talking about public equities here. And that will obviously help, create a really robust public environment for tokenization to take off. But that could take some time here. Some companies may be more interested than others. And the same goes with the private markets, right? Some private companies, are less excited about having retail own, a significant portion of their shares, but we think others are. And I think we're going to start to see more and more of that, where you really, as a private or a public company, you see the benefit to having retail involved here with tokenization as the kind of the way in.
So just to be clear about if I buy a stock on chain through Robinhood, you guys are actually buying the stock, right? You're selling me that piece of however many people buy it. So it is backed by a stock. It's in Robinhood's possession and your users own whatever they own of it, correct?
That's right. Yeah, we have the stock there and you have the digital representation of that stock in the EU. Again, this is limited to our EU customers right now because of the part regulatory differences here. But yeah, as an EU customer, you're holding the tokenized version of that, let's call it a physical share of a stock, US stock that we have in the broker, that we custody in a broker.
Is this different than E-Trade when I own half a Tesla stock? Because it's the same kind of concept, just different, as they say, rails, different technology backing it up, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, this is a different technology layer than just owning that fractional share directly, right? And the things that it brings with that or could bring with that down the road, that's where it's different, right? So you think about right now we have T+1. Could we go to either same day settlement or almost instantaneous settlement, right? Which takes a lot of risk out of the system. Can we have global markets trading 24/7 in US equities and global equities, right? Where US customers get the benefit of that too. And then of course, we talked a little bit about DeFi in the context of legislation. There's obviously a lot of applications for DeFi here, right? What if I want to take my tokenized version of whatever stock I own, put it into my non-custodial wallet, and use that in the various DeFi applications? You could see that happening too. That's where it gets certainly more complicated with the regulatory environment.
Well, I kind of ask this question of when I get crypto people on, at the end of it, the tokenization of a stock or an equity just basically comes out of different technologies. The company that you buy it through owns it. It is there. Is that our fault, the people that are pro crypto, for trying to because we geek out on the technology. It's just so cool. It's a decentralized ledger and it's immutable and this, that, and the next thing. Is it kind of our fault that a lot of stuff gets lost in the shuffle? Like when I go to my ATM machine, I don't really care how the cash gets to me as long as I get my $20, right? Like, Is it our fault, the pro blockchain people, that kind of like obscured some of what really this is because we got so excited of the promise?
I wouldn't say it's your fault. I would say that this is a pretty rapidly developing world that we're all living in here from a technology standpoint, and then really within that crypto, right? There are a ton of different products and services and technologies that people are building or have already built. And so you can take the whole world of like tokens, right? I mean, there are so many tokens now that you can trade, and some of them are starting to have use cases. Maybe some are meme coins and don't necessarily. And that got a lot of attention over the last 4 years. But really, we're more probably, I mean, that's an important part of the business, don't get me wrong, but we're really excited about the technology here and what the technology brings to our kind of legacy markets, right? And again, we've talked about that a little bit in this conversation already, right? Enhanced liquidity, enhanced transparency, more automation, lower costs, more efficiency, right? When you really boil that down, it means cheaper financial services and more accessible financial services on a global scale. And that's what is really exciting. So I would say that there are so many different things that people are working on that it's easy to get lost in the
Right.
shuffle. You could just focus on lending as one application, staking, tokens, tokenization. There's just so many different things to pay attention to. Obviously, we think tokenization is one of the bigger ones.
You mentioned transparency again. I want to come back to that. Why are blockchain transactions, crypto transactions, why do you say that they are more transparent? This gets lost in the narrative a lot too.
Yeah, so the blockchain is basically should be an immutable record of transactions that you can look at, and it's verifiable, right? And there's no central intermediary behind it. And so the users who are kind of maintaining the blockchain ecosystem are ensuring that you have accurate transactions, right? And that those records can't be changed. And then there's the overlay there of smart contracts. So, contracts that execute under certain conditions, you can build transparency, you can build compliance into the code. And that's not only more transparent, but you're now automating more. You have less human involvement, less human error, right? You can potentially take out some of the cost and friction of having certain intermediary functions there. Maybe you don't want to get rid of all intermediaries, but certain intermediary functions there. And so that's when we talk about kind of more transparency, auditability, and the ability to kind of build these types of things, compliance, transparency into the code itself, into the smart contracts.
You've already alluded to at the beginning of our conversation, we're talking about regulatory stuff. Robinhood put out a paper about tokenization, which I'll put a link to in the episode page, and I encourage everybody to take a look at it because it's very helpful. But one of the things that in this paper it says, and you just alluded to it, the current regulatory regime, it's incompatible with tokenization on a few levels. But you say other countries like Europe and stuff, it's better. Like it's easier to get it done. Why is that?
Definitely read the tokenization piece and read all of our policy papers because I think they're really interesting, thought-provoking pieces. Prediction markets, there's retail and access to private securities. On tokenization, you said it, other jurisdictions, I wouldn't say they're doing a better job than us. They're just farther ahead than us. And so these regulatory environments, the EU being one that we've already talked about, where we're able to actually do a tokenized U.S. equities product in the EU. We can't do it in the U.S. You've got other jurisdictions in the Middle East and Asia that have kind of put together more comprehensive regulatory frameworks that are allowing tokenization to happen. Obviously, you saw that globally with respect to tokenizing fixed income in the recent past here. And so they are ahead of us. We need to take the lead back. We are the financial capital of the world. We are the most innovative country. We really need to lead here. We haven't, unfortunately, for several years now, but I think we have the right teams in place at the federal level. I think, for one thing, Congress, as we talked about, is paying a lot of attention to this and wants the U.S. to lead here. And I think the same thing with the SEC and the CFTC. I know they're taking this very seriously. They want to make this work, but they also want to, obviously, they have investor protection missions too. That's built into the SEC's mission. And they want to make sure this is done in as safe and compliant a way as possible. And so, I know we and other firms are kind of working with the SEC right now to figure out how do we take this idea of tokenizing U.S. public companies stock and private company stock and do it in a way that, yes, maybe we need some relief, maybe we need some exemptive relief, maybe we need certain changes to the rules, but we can do this in a safe way, and we can open up these markets to, one, on the private side to retail, which has historically not really had very limited access to this or no access to it. And then on the private and public side, bringing all of the efficiencies and operational benefits to our legacy markets in these spaces.
As we close this out, this is a legal tech podcast. A lot of our listeners are lawyers. So question I want to ask is, let's say you're not a securities lawyer, you're not a financial services lawyer. Why should you care? You talked about tokenization. Let's just talk about that. Why should you care that tokenization of real world assets is coming down the pike? And not only why you should care, like, how do you learn about it? Where do you go?
Great question. I mean, I think if you subscribe to the view that the technology that we're talking about here, tokenization, distributed ledger technology, if you believe that that is going to fundamentally change financial services, and obviously we do, I don't know if you heard Vlad say, tokenization is going to eat the world here, right? If you believe that, and again, we do, then there's no reason why that's not going to happen across other industries, other markets, right? And I touched on art, real estate.
Real estate. I think it's coming there, yeah.
Name your real world asset, right? I mean, why do we have paper deeds anymore if you want to buy a house, right? Why can't I buy certain units in a condo building or several condo buildings in a really localized place that I believe is going to grow? And of course, tokenization could make that easier. So if you're a lawyer and you deal with real world assets, which almost all, if not all of us do, you should care about tokenization. And I think you should care about it whether or not you think this is going to be revolutionary, because at the end of the day, it's here to stay and it's going to impact you one way or the other. Again, if maybe it's going to fundamentally change things. We certainly think it is, but even if it, for whatever reason, doesn't, it's still going to impact pretty much every lawyer out there. So in terms of learning about this, there are a lot of great resources that law firms, consulting firms have put out on the fundamentals of tokenization, the fundamentals of blockchain technology. Take a look at some of the material that the regulators have put out recently. I think the SEC and the CFTC have said some really thoughtful things about, how to do this responsibly. Certainly you mentioned our policy papers. Others in the industry are putting out a lot of content on this, talking a lot about it, because we think it is the future of finance.
Lucas, thanks for coming back. I appreciate your time as always. It's very interesting conversation, and I like the way things are going. So thanks for coming back. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chad. Thanks for having me.
Okay, that's a wrap for today's episode. As always, we really appreciate you listening. If you want to subscribe, you can find us on most major podcast platforms like Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, etc. Also, if you like us enough, I hope you leave us a favorable review. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, this has been Technically Legal.